When we arrived at Esna, we were told that there was a problem and that only one of the locks was working. We were due to go through at 11:30, but it was about 3 p.m. before we managed it. And this meant that the afternoon visit to the Luxor temple had to be delayed until the next day. But as everyone seemed to be enjoying a pleasant, leisurely day, I don't think anyone was worried about not doing anything. This visit to the locks was much quieter than last time, without the guys in their rowing boats trying to sell us things. But perhaps they only work on boats going the other way. Here at Esna in 2017, as at Hatshepsut, there was a terrorist attack. A policeman and a civilian were killed and several people injured. I went onto the bridge of the Royal Viking in the morning. The captain looked a force to be reckoned with in his galabeer and turban, but there was an armed security guard with him. There's at least one on all boats at all times. The Egyptians are keen that nothing should happen that would cause major problems for the tourist industry. Ancient Egyptians had many gods, but perhaps the most important and most worshipped was Ra, the sun god. He was believed to have created the 12 hours of day by sailing the sky from east to west, where he would then sail in his solar barge through the underworld, where it was supposed that he fought the forces of chaos each night to emerge triumphant the next morning. At Giza, where we're to go later, is a magnificent funerary barge, which was discovered near the Great Pyramid of Khufu. It's believed it was a ritual barge to carry the resurrected king with the sun god Ra across the heavens. It may all be myth and superstition, but the Egyptians believed it. And even today, watching that same sun go down, as they did, in their land, it has a compelling magic about it. There were 2 obelisks in front of the Luxor temple. One is still here, but the other was presented to the French in 1829, and now stands in the Place de la Concorde in Paris. It was given in exchange, bizarrely, for a French mechanical clock. After the obelisk was taken, the clock proved to be faulty. It's now in the Cairo citadel, where it still doesn't work. The Temple of Karnak is only about 2 miles away, once joined by this great avenue of sphinxes. And the Egyptians are now excavating the rest of the avenue and intend to restore it to the splendid processional way that it once was. This statue of Ramesses II is, I think, the most beautiful of all that we've seen in Egypt.
Feeding, giving food to the Egyptians. And this is a river for the Egyptians. The wet one with water and the one who's feeding the Egyptians. And having this on the side of the throne, it means that I'm the king who kept Egypt as a united country, upper and lower together. So that's called cemetery. To be a church. That's why you see the alcove there. But it was a symbolic church, it was not a real one. Because if it was a real one, this alcove would be to the east, not to the south. So it was like announcing the beginning of a new era or a new time. Then it was converted to be a Roman chapel. And what you see there, the face is there, is the procession of the Roman emperor, most probably Constantinus, coming over to visit Egypt.
Although Ramesses II added to the temple and put statues of himself at the front and inside, the temple was first completed by Tutankhamun. And here's a statue of Tutankhamun with his wife, who was actually also his half-sister. Within the ancient walls of the temple, and built on earlier Christian basilicas, is a mosque, built in the 1820s, making the whole complex one of the oldest continuously used places of worship in the world. Building started at Karnak nearly 3,500 years ago. We look at that time in Europe and call it the Bronze Age. We had the beaker people, life was primitive, and burials were made in long and round barrows. The ancient Egyptians were very civilized in comparison.
4 columns were built that high 3,300 years ago.
It's not easy here to judge the scale of these columns. Our guide, Osama, asked members of our group to encircle the base of one of them, and with arms completely outstretched and touching hands, it took 9 people to complete the circle.
Both hands are stretched out. Only the needed number. Only the needed number. Both hands are stretched out. It will be like about 17 feet. Diameter. See? And this is what we call it the Nesu beam title. Nesu. Upper and lower teeth. Nesu BT title. And here it reads Western Hebrew City Marian Amur. This is the name of it. Western Hebrew City Marian Amur. And then in other places you find the cartoon and in front of it what 300.
The largest of these 2 huge obelisks was erected here by Queen Hatshepsut. Well, I expect she had 1 or 2 men to do the actual work for her. Osama told us that even now, though there are many theories about how the obelisk was put up, nobody really has a clue. An inscription on the base says that just cutting the monolith out of the quarry bedrock took 7 months. It's 97 feet high and estimated to weigh at least 320 tons. You need guide? Take photos? I look after you. Very cheap. After a break in the afternoon, we went back to Karnak in the evening for the Sonne Lumiere show. It wasn't really a great success. At the beginning, when everyone was assembled, not just our group, but hundreds of others, we progressed through the temple, stopping at various points. We couldn't see or hear properly, because people were making so much noise, and in spite of notices asking people not to use flash photography, nearly all of them ignored it. The whole effect of the sound and light show was ruined. We had an early start this morning to have breakfast and be ready to leave the Royal Viking at 7. An uneventful flight took us from Luxor to Cairo, and we eventually arrived at the Mina House Hotel. We were very impressed with the hotel. It was a good-sized room, the beds looked good, the bathroom was large and spotless, and a great balcony looked out across the gardens through the palm trees to the pyramids close by. We were staying in the relatively new garden wing, but Mina House was originally a hunting lodge built in 1869. It was a 2-story building known as the Mud Hut. It was bought in 1890 by an English couple who saw the potential of having a hotel so close to the pyramids. It was occupied by Australian troops during both World Wars and then converted to a hospital for wounded Australian soldiers. We unpacked and had a late lunch, after which we took a leisurely stroll around the grounds, and then were ready at 5:30 to be picked up to go to the Sonne Lumiere at the pyramids. There were hundreds of people of all nationalities at the show, and the atmosphere was lively and fun. But once we were given our tickets and allowed to go through the gates, David was told that he couldn't take the video camera with him, so no film of the event. He had to hand it in at the ticket office and collect it later on the way out. Just as at Karnak, there were signs everywhere stating that flash photography was forbidden. Also, just as at Karnak, most people ignored it altogether. Although the flashes didn't affect the show's lighting because everything was at quite a distance, they seemed to be going off in our eyes a lot, and it was very annoying. But the show itself was very good, much better than at Karnak, and the pyramids looked magnificent. This was a day we'd been looking forward to. With a small group and a guide, our tour took us not only around the pyramids, but also inside the Great Pyramid of Khufu. And there is the Mina House Hotel. We couldn't have stayed in a place any closer.
Yes.
At 481 feet, this was the tallest man-made structure in the world for more than 3,800 years. Built as a tomb for the pharaoh, Khufu, it used nearly 2.5 million blocks of stone and granite, some weighing up to 80 tons. When finished, it was covered in white limestone with smooth sides and would have looked like a vast mirror in the desert reflecting the sun. Over the centuries, Almost every bit of that limestone has been pilfered to make the Cairo that we see today.
Oh, it's much higher.
Higher, but it's kind of like rocky.
Once we'd been inside Khufu's burial chamber at the heart of the Great Pyramid, we were driven up to a vantage point where we could look back and have tremendous views. There were lots of camels, traders with their stalls, and very pushy guys offering to take photos of you on your own camera, for which they demanded a huge tip. We were later told of an incident there that was witnessed by one of our group. An Arab took the camera from a Japanese tourist and took photos of him and his family with the pyramids in the background. He then demanded a massive tip before he would return the camera. Well, as a nation, some Japanese are incredibly polite with impeccable manners, and this poor tourist couldn't cope with the situation and just walked off, leaving the Arab with the camera.
About 4,000 or 5,000 years old.
Okay guys, so we're just standing in front of the Giza Great Sphinx, representing Pharaoh Jed Ifra, Pharaoh Kefren, who built the second Giza pyramids, also representing himself as a guard of the Giza Plateau. The body of a lion, representing the power, and the face of a man, representing the smart and the intelligence. The story of the Sphinx, when Pharaoh Kefren, when Pharaoh Jed Ifra, interesting to build his pyramid, he just ordered his builders and his workers to bring for him
A trio of musicians played us into lunch, which was laid on at a touristy restaurant on our way to Saqqara. Local women sat outside next to charcoal stoves to show us how they baked bread, It was beautifully cool there and clean, though we couldn't help wondering if we'd all end up with hepatitis, dysentery, diarrhea, sickness and vomiting. The male toilet attendant was about 8 years old, offering toilet paper to dry your hands. The smallest tip I could give him was 5 Egyptian pounds, which was far too much for him, but only worth about 63 pence. He was delighted. Unlike the relatively smooth sides of the pyramids at Giza, this one is built in stepped sections called mastabas. Mastaba is an Arabic word meaning bench, and they were used as burial tombs. It was here, for the first time, that a second, third, fourth and fifth mastaba, each smaller than the previous one, was put on top to make the great steps. It was the first prototype for all later pyramids. In the hope that we would part with some money, we were taken to a so-called carpet school, where we were told that children could learn carpet making and equip themselves with skills that would help them to find work one day. These schools are all government-run, and the children, we're told, paid well to learn the trade. We were also told that the children would be between 15 and 18 years old. Well, most of them seemed to be between 8 and 10 years old, and looked far too young to be spending hours working at looms making carpets by hand, stitch by stitch, for 4 hours at a time. It looked like child exploitation, and we were not impressed.
Inside also some of the remains of City of Death. Called City of Death because we have a very poor people.
The citadel in Cairo is the largest medieval fortress in the world, built by Saladin, the first Sultan of Egypt and Syria in the 12th century, and crowned with the Mosque of Muhammad Ali 700 years later. He was the ruler of Egypt for 43 years from 1805 and is considered to be the founder of modern Egypt. And this is the mechanical clock that never worked that was given by the French in exchange for the obelisk from the Temple of Luxor.
Most of the mosques made of alabaster. The upper part made of colored blossom. This way, please.
Una hace española, muy bien, señor. Luego te bautiza, ¿qué haces? O sea, si eres menos cristiano, o sea, si tú no vas mucho...
Está de pie, luego se pone de pie y la chaqueta. هاي كده هاي يمين
No, it's not.
Is it like this all the time?
All the time, yes, all the time.
And
That's a pretty enough
انت بتحصل في السنة مرة واحدة كده وشوف الكلفة
And after all that, it was a relief to get back to the relative peace and quiet of the Mina House Hotel. The afternoon had also taken us to the Egyptian Museum, though there was absolutely no filming or photography allowed. We had 2.5 hours there, which seemed to go nowhere. We spent most of the time looking at the treasures of Tutankhamun. Of the 2,500 items discovered in his tomb, 1,700 are on display here. We couldn't possibly see them all, but we did see the famous gold death masks, the lion throne, chariots, statues, and smaller items such as the pharaoh's bows, arrows, and even the wilting bouquets of flowers that were put inside his tomb. We saw his socks and shoes, and in a separate room, the most spectacular jewellery.
Which time?
Very soon, 30 minutes. Are you a special price? Are you a special price? 50 Egyptian pounds. 50 Egyptian pounds.
كمان هات البلاطة بس